back to PSN Sports Network. I'm your host this week, Nikita Magnum, and Artie and Brock. Here we are. It is the bowl season for college football. We're going to pick these up and do a little pick 'em here. And first up is the RL Carriers New Orleans Bowl. You have a 7-5 Nevada Wolfpack team taking on an 8-4 Louisiana Lafayette Raging Cajuns teams in the Superdome. Artie, what is your take on this game?
Well, one thing that sticks out to me is that Lafayette being at home, basically, because, playing in their home state, expect the crowd to be raucous and be more towards the Raging Cajuns. But as far as the game goes, Nevada has really competed well in the Mountain West, and Lafayette also doing well in the Sun Belt. But to me, the Mountain West may be a little deeper than the Sun Belt. So just looking at it, I would probably have to go with Nevada on this one.
Brock, looking at this game and the breakdown, what would be your deciding factor to determine your winner for this game?
Well, just looking at it overall, Louisiana Lafayette, they're in their home state, so it's going to be home field advantage for them, I believe. But overall, just looking at the matchup, I'd have to go with Louisiana Lafayette because of the atmosphere, because they're going right up the road to the Mercedes Dome, Superdome there in Louisiana. So my gut feeling is saying that, Louisiana Lafayette will come out and beat Nevada for that bowl victory.
Well, for bowl number 2, we go out west to the Gildan, New Mexico Bowl taking place in Albuquerque this year at University Stadium. You have the University of Texas El Paso 7-5 on the year taking on the Aggies from Utah State at 9-4. Brock, what is the look of this matchup for you?
Well, Utah State, first game of the year they had to go to Tennessee. They got, beat pretty bad there by, a pretty good Tennessee team. Going down the line, just looking at their schedule here, they beat a BYU team who lost their quarterback in that game, I believe. They beat them 35-20 at UAB. Their last game of the year against Boise, they get beat. So just looking at it overall, in my eyes, I'm going to go with Utah here, Utah State, to beat UTEP. I think UTEP's a good team, but I think Utah State's an even better team. So just from my preview and my pick, I like Utah State in this game.
That's a good pick, but one thing it'll really make a difference is if Utah State's quarterback's healthy. He's been banged up partially through the year, and it's kind of hurt the Aggies at times. But, overall, they've managed to keep it together for the most part. And as you say, UTEP maybe not necessarily has played that tough a schedule as to where Utah State's played some tougher teams and come out on top in some of those, like the BYU game, for instance. It was very close and competitive. And also, playing an SEC caliber type team in Tennessee. But as you pick the Aggies, and I like that one also.
Well, looking at the Tennessee, they only got better as the year went on, so Utah State getting beat by them that bad really wasn't that bad a loss for them. So we move on now. We're going to Las Vegas for the Royal Purple Las Vegas Bowl. And a pretty interesting matchup. You have a 22-ranked Utah Ute team at 8-4 taking on Jim McElwain's Colorado State Rams team at 10-2. Artie, what do you think McElwain has in store for the Utes?
Well, just more of the same. They're gonna feed D Hart the ball, which has been a very good recipe for them. But Utah is. The defense that really have had trouble with the pass, but they've kind of controlled the run. They played earlier in the year. They stopped a good running back in Buck Allen. He had somewhere close to around 100 yards, and to me, he may be better than D Hart. So, Utah's tough inside, and I expect them to contain them. But I think, once again, it's going to come down to quarterback play for Utah, which has been up and down all season long. If you're a Utes fan, you definitely understand what I'm talking about. They've, bounced between two different quarterbacks because of whether it be bad play or injuries or what have you. But at the end of the night, though, I kind of like the Utes to kind of put the kibosh on McElwain's big year.
Brock, how does this Colorado State team compare to the Alabama teams that McElwain was coordinator for all those years?
Well, when McElwain took the job up at Colorado State, no one really knew what to expect from him coming in. And he sort of turned that program around a little bit. This year they went 10-2. They got beat by a good Boise State team, 37-24 on the road. Then their last game of the year, they got beat by Air Force 27-24 on the road again. So you could say they've played both those teams that they've lost to, well on the road. Every other game they've won in between there. But McElwain just going to Colorado State, like I said, he's turned that program around. Even though after this bowl game he's going to Florida to, concentrate to get that team turned around in the future. I just think overall he's brought some life back to Colorado State. And just looking at this matchup and this bowl game, I think Utah being in the Pac-12 and just the experience they have against better opponents, I guess you could say, and they deal with speed week in and week out. They play Oregon, sort of give that game away, you could say. But just going back to this matchup, I like Utah in this game because I think they have speed. I think they have more players at skilled positions than Colorado State. But don't be surprised if Colorado State, gives them the ball game.
Well, you talking about Colorado State. They tend to win those close games, and that's been, their hallmark all year. They've been able to win those, 1 and 2 point games, as to where Utah has kind of dropped a few of those. So, if it gets to a tight game, yeah, I kind of like the Rams also in that situation. But, just looking at the Rams overall, that Mountain West, it's decent. It's not a bad conference by any means, but it kind of worries me just the fact that they kind of slide by, just a player here and there, and that team is, probably looking at 6-6 or worse. But they've had been fortunate all year, and it worked out for them.
Well, I want to go back real quick to Jim McElwain here. Him going to Florida next year. Like I said, don't overlook Colorado State in this game to give Utah a ball game. But will McElwain sort of be looking ahead to next year, going to Gainesville, going to Florida, and trying to get that team turned around, back to a national championship team, and back to a team that can compete, for the SEC in the East Division?
Well, historically, if you look at it, the way this whole getting a job before going into a bowl game, most coaches don't choose to coach that bowl game because they want to go ahead and move on to greener pastures or, whatever their situation is. But in this case, I don't know. I think he's took a lot of pride in this Ram team, and I think he wants to finish this thing out right. I don't see him allowing his new job to affect his old job, and I still, I expect Colorado State to play well, but I do like Utah to win it.
Well, another thing that might factor in is that Colorado State could be looking to send their coach out on a winning note after giving him a 10-win season, looking to improve to 11-2. So we'll just have to wait and see how the Rams pan out against the Utes, who, like Brock said, let an Oregon team off the hook a little bit with a costly mistake early in the game. So look for a good battle there in Las Vegas. Moving down, we go to the famous Idaho Potato Bowl on the Blue Field in Boise. And it'll be the 8-4 Western Michigan Broncos taking on the Falcons from Air Force, sitting at 9-3. And Brock, how are the Falcons? They're not usually that dominant defensive team, but they usually run the option offense pretty well. How are they going to match up against this MAC team coming in from Western Michigan?
I think they'll actually match up pretty well against them. Like you say, they come in, they run the triple option, like Navy, like Army, like some of these other teams, including Georgia Tech in there. But just looking at Air Force, they're not bad on defense, but they do probably give up some points on you. Western Michigan, they're a good football team. Don't overlook them coming into this ball game, playing Air Force. But from my perspective, I just like Air Force to run the ball, do what they do, and, come out with a victory.
That's a very good pick, and I tend to agree with you on that one. Just to your point about the defense, though, you got to keep in mind that, the Air Force doesn't get the greatest athletes in the world, which means, if you realize at the college level, you have to have speed to be able to stop these teams. And so, obviously, if you don't have the athletes, you can kind of get away with it on offense just using power, but can't really do that on defense. And so that gives them a little bit of a disadvantage, but they do well with what they got. One thought, though, I want to leave with you is the fact that Calhoun and company are actually, I believe, 2-5 in their past 7 bowl games. So it kind of, if I was the Falcon fans, I'd be a little worried. Maybe the same old story. They don't tend to win these bowl games, but just, looking at this game in a normal light, expect probably a lot of points, but I like the Falcons to go ahead and outscore them.
Coming up next is the first year for this bowl game. It is the Raycom Media Camellia Bowl, and it will be in Montgomery this year. You have a 6-6 South Alabama team taking on Bowling Green at 7-6. And Artie, you could argue that 6-6, is not really that good a record, but it gets you into a bowl game with 6 wins. But you could also argue the fact that a UAB team that's getting their program took away from has easily slid into this bowl game as easy as South Alabama did.
Well, yeah, if you want to look at it just in a head-to-head perspective, I think UAB was the better team. I don't know if they were, leaps and bounds better, but I think they would beat USA most of the time. But one thing, a lot of people don't realize, they think, these bowls are unnecessary and things like that, but this is important to the programs just in general as these teams get this kind of money to, get these bowl games, which helps their programs. USA is not going to be able to pay no $10 million coach or nothing like that. They need all the, funding they can get, and that's exactly what they get from these bowl games. But going ahead and looking at this matchup, you get the inaugural, as you say, Camellia Bowl, which, be in Montgomery. So USA, I'm sure, will have the crowd packed out. That's not, but I don't know, 2-3 hours maybe away. And so, obviously, I think you're going to see a whole lot of red, white, and blue in the building. And then you got this Bowling Green team who's, year in, year out at a bowl, so this will be nothing new to them. Just a really good matchup. This is not your typical really good Bowling Green team, and I don't know. I may be a little crazy on this, but I kind of like the Jaguars maybe to pull the upset.
Well, looking at this bowl game, it's in the backyard of South Alabama, pretty much. It's like you said, right up the road. Bowling Green coming off a bad loss, to Northern Illinois in their conference game. Overall, looking at this game, just looking at South Alabama's schedule right here, Mississippi State, even though they got beat 35-3, for probably the first quarter and a half, or maybe even the first half, they played them pretty solid.
That's right.
So, they're a tough little team coming from the FCS level up to a Division I level. And just going on down here, they get beat by South Carolina, who's been up and down. Yeah, they're an SEC team, but so is Mississippi State. They play South Carolina, not so terrible, and only lose to Navy by 2 points in a shootout. Bowling Green, on the other hand, they've sort of been up and down this year. Like I said, they get blown out by Northern Illinois. Overall matchup top, I'm going to lean towards Bowling Green just because I think they're a little bit of a better team, in my opinion. But, who knows? It's in South Alabama, pretty much. They'll have home field advantage. But don't overlook, the Falcons of Bowling Green to come in and, I guess, ruin.
Well, wouldn't you agree, though, that this is pretty much a toss-up for the most part?
Yeah, for the most part I would, because both teams are, somewhat similar.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, I just like Bowling Green overall.
Well, as you say, Coach Joey Jones and the Jaguars, the defense is what they, live off of. The offense has been a little sketchy at times, but, from what I've watched of them, they have the ability to throw the deep ball at times, which is their main source of trying to score. But they have had their problems scoring some, and if this thing gets into a track meet, it will definitely favor the Falcons.
I'd agree with that.
And folks, don't sell these games short. They might be lower level games to you, but these are the games that we usually tend to steer toward because they're a lot better games, and the fact that these teams don't usually get to play each other, so there's a lot of feeling out for the first 2 or 3 quarters, and then the drama and the excitement all builds up toward the fourth quarter. And looking at Monday's game next week, it's the only game for that night. It is, I'm pretty sure this is the first ever Miami Beach Bowl. If I'm wrong, y'all can correct me. It'll take place at Marlins Park in Miami. You got 8-4 BYU taking on 9-3 Memphis. You have BYU, which is in their first year of the independent, I guess you want to say conference, and Memphis is that perennial Conference USA, right in the mix. And already the Tigers and the Cougars, BYU's without their quarterback, is that going to kill them in the long run? And who do you have going down winning this game?
Well, if you look back at when he first went down, it definitely killed him there for a while. I think he dropped 4 in a row or thereabouts and really struggled. But it seemed like the last half of the season maybe he got a little more comfortable with the backup quarterback, and he, they put up some numbers. I mean, it was against some lower level competition, but they did score, I believe, 40-something, 50-something in those last few games. So, I mean, it seems to me they've kind of got their feet under them, and they're going to have their feet under them. I mean, this Memphis team is pretty good. They're young, but they're pretty talented. I mean, nobody really knows a whole lot about them, but they're nothing to be, sneezed at. And they play pretty good defense. They played Ole Miss tight earlier in the year, and also played a really good game against Hunley and the Bruins, and just somehow managed to lose that one. But looking at this game, it's going to be close. But I like Memphis actually to win.
Well, already, like you say, they dropped after that Utah State loss. Their next 3 games after that loss, BYU did 4-0. They go up to Texas, they blow them out. And then on the other side, you got Memphis, who plays UCLA close in the Rose Bowl. They give Ole Miss a tight ball game until about the fourth quarter. And Memphis, correct me if I'm wrong, last year they didn't win but maybe 2 or 3 games?
That's about right, maybe 3.
So turning it around all this year in just a season to go 9-3, be a powerhouse in their conference, you could say. But looking at this matchup, I like BYU to win this game because I think, they've sort of adapted to their new quarterback. They're a little bit of a better team, I think. I think their defense is a little bit more stiff than what Memphis is. So coming into this game, I like the Cougars of BYU to come out with a win.
Yeah, I definitely tend to agree with you on the offense or on the defensive side of it. I think maybe BYU's a little bit better, but definitely inside. I think they're going to give Memphis a hard time running the ball, and that could lead to them coming out on top.
And we go now to Tuesday's games for December the 23rd, and to me, this could be the game so far up to this point that would be the best ball game. You have the Boca Raton Bowl, and you have 12-1 Marshall taking on the MAC champion Northern Illinois Huskies, sitting at 11-2. And Marshall, heartbreaking high-scoring loss to Western Kentucky to close out their year, and then Northern Illinois just absolutely embarrassing Bowling Green in that MAC championship. Probably not going to be a lot of defense. Talk about these offensive teams and how this translates into a really good bowl game.
Well, who would have ever thought that we'd have had, 15 combined touchdown passes or something like that in the Marshall and Western Kentucky game? I mean, in a 67-66 overtime thriller. I mean, who would have thought that? You looked at that score and thought it was basketball season. And so, just overall, this Marshall team, it came down to them and Florida State, as the two left unbeaten teams in college football. Then the last game of the year, Marshall gets beat or upset or whatever you want to call it by Western Kentucky. On the other hand, Northern Illinois, they've lost 2 games this year. You know, they blow out Bowling Green in their conference win. I think it's a pretty even matchup, but my gut feeling is saying Marshall because good quarterback, good offense, pretty good defense, but you could also say the same thing about Northern Illinois. But I just think, once again, I think it'll come down to quarterback play, and I think Marshall has the advantage in that.
Absolutely. I mean, Cato, he holds the record for the most consecutive touchdown passes in a game. I mean, that in itself is extremely impressive. I don't know the exact number on that, but it's a bunch. And you know, you just basically you can bet you about $1 he's going to throw a touchdown pass in any game that he plays in. And also able to do it with his feet. I mean, you stop him passing it, he's going to run it. Just a total dual threat quarterback. And, you know, you're talking about Northern Illinois, some losses that kind of stuck out to me. I believe they lost to Central Michigan. That kind of worries me just a little bit. Maybe not as consistent. And you know, the MAC, not necessarily the most strongest conference this year. I mean, they've kind of been down, to be honest with you. So I kind of like the old Thunder and Herd to go ahead and close this out the right way. I mean, I know they would have liked to have went undefeated and possibly got in one of the Big Six bowls, but, you know, it just didn't quite work out for them. But, you know, just to be able to say that you are 13-1 would be, you know, a definite feather in your cap.
Well, on this game, real quick, Artie, do you think this game will be a shootout like the Western Kentucky game and just an all-out, I guess, throw it around, touchdown after touchdown after touchdown, or more of a intermediate game to where it's kind of high scoring but not too high like Marshall and Western Kentucky?
I'd have to lean more towards the 30-something game. I mean, you got to look at it this way. This Northern Illinois team's going to probably want to run the ball, and if they do that, they're going to keep Cato and company off the field, and that's going to slow down that high-octane offense. So plus, Marshall's defense is not that bad, really. I don't know really what happened in that Western Kentucky game, but they just couldn't stop them. I mean, I guess you really can contribute a lot of that to the Western Kentucky quarterback. He really threw the ball well and just placed it in all the right spots where they couldn't stop him. So I don't expect this thing to be no 60-something by any means. But I do like, you know, Marshall to go ahead and, like I say, win maybe a high 30s, low 30s type game.
Well, and even the loss that Marshall took to Western Kentucky, I'm not saying it was a fluke for the Hilltoppers, but, you know, every now and then a coach gets enough gumption to roll the dice and he goes for 2 instead of kicking an extra point, and just so happens he got it. So that's how they defeat the Thunder and Herd. But Marshall will bounce back, as Brock and Artie have told you.
And another thing about that, though, is the fact that Marshall actually turned the ball over, I believe, 3 or 4 times in that game. So they kind of shot themselves in the foot and probably let their undefeated season go up in smoke.
Very true. They're a very underrated Conference USA team, which is not a very big conference. They don't get a whole lot of love because of the Power 5, but it's a very unique conference in all the teams that are in it. Up next, what could be the longest name for any bowl in the history of bowls, we have the San Diego County Credit Union Poinsettia Bowl taking place in Qualcomm Stadium in San Diego, California, home of course, the San Diego State Aztecs, as also the San Diego Chargers. But you have a 7-5 Navy midshipman team taking on the San Diego State Aztecs, who are also 7-5. And Artie, you got Navy, who's coming off the big win over Army, the big rivalry. You know, the Commander-in-Chief trilogy there, you want to call it. And the Aztecs, you know, they play tough usually in most games that they're in. And do you think if Navy controls the football, controls the clock, does not allow San Diego State to touch the ball much, is there any chance San Diego State has a win in this ball game?
I don't. I mean, Navy, when they get that running game going, they just suffocate you because they put a lot of pressure on the offense because you have to go and you have to deliver on the possessions that you get. And if Reynolds and company can get that running game rolling, it's going to be very difficult on the Aztecs.
Already, like you said, if Reynolds and company can get the running game going, it'll be a long night for them trying to stop that triple option and that run game they got. It seems like Reynolds has been there forever.
That's very true.
He's been in the offense 4 years now. He can run it to perfection, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
He knows what to do and when to do it. San Diego, if they can stop the running game, I like them to beat Navy. I think they'll be able to throw the ball, bounce it out with the run as well, play defense, like I said, if they can stop Navy's running game. But I don't think they'll be able to stop the triple option because, even though they have pretty much an extra week to prepare for them, it's still going to be hard for them to understand, I guess, the philosophy and how to, choose which gap to close up, who to take. Do I take the picks man? Do I take the quarterback,
Well, it takes a very disciplined defense because you have to learn how to stay in your lanes, and you have to do it even when it feels like you're not really in the play. You have to stick with your job according to what scheme you're running. And for the Aztecs, you was talking about them being able to move the ball. From what I've watched of Navy, the run defense is not that bad. So, don't expect the Aztecs to be able to run it down the throat by any means. And don't sleep on Reynolds throwing the ball. He's not Peyton Manning by any means, but he's capable of completing the ball if you don't pay attention to him. But as far as a pick on this game, I know, Navy's coming off a little bit of a sketchy win over a shaky Army team, but that game in itself, I think you kind of throw everything out the back door. It was just a cool game to watch. I felt like both teams just played their hearts out. And Army played probably the best game they played all year by far, and definitely made it very competitive. But Navy was just better, and I expect Navy to win this thing.
Yeah, Artie, I'd have to go with you on this one. I just think Navy and that triple option attack is just going to do too much for, San Diego State to game plan for.
But also keep in mind, the Aztecs are actually going to play at home. So, but on that front, actually Navy has won the Poinsettia Bowl, I believe, maybe once or twice over the past 2-3 years. So, they're all about playing in San Diego. So, we'll see.
Up next, we slide down to the Bahamas, and we're going to look at the Popeyes Bahamas Bowl, and it's got 7-5 Central Michigan taking on the Hilltoppers from Western Kentucky, sitting also at 7-5. And Brock, you got two pretty evenly matched teams in this one. Western Kentucky, like we said, a big win over Marshall this year, kind of set them apart from all the other teams in their conference. Central Michigan in the MAC, like we said, might be down a little bit. But two evenly matched teams, this will probably be a really, really good ball game. Who do you like in this one?
Well, Nikita, like you said, Western Kentucky, the only team to beat Marshall this year, in a thrilling ball game if you like high-scoring games, if you're not really a defensive person. Just looking at the matchup here, overall, I like Western Kentucky over Central Michigan. I think Central Michigan's a good team. I think they'll give Western Kentucky a ball game. But at the end of the day, I just like Western Kentucky because I just think they're a better team. And not just because they beat Marshall, but because I think they just have that attack about them to where they can show teams that they can throw the ball, they can run the ball, and they can, get the job done when it comes, that time, when it comes crunch time.
Brock, you're on a roll. That's all I can say. Western Kentucky, the high-flying passing attack that Petrino installed and this new coach has kept going, and the quarterback that I'm sure Petrino had a lot to do with. And they're really playing well, as, coming off the big win over Marshall. As to where, the Chippewas, they've had a solid year, but, their really only landmark win is over a Northern Illinois team who was the conference champ, but it's not the UNI teams of old, or excuse me, NIU teams of old. This team's not a top 25 team by any means, and I don't know. I like the Hilltoppers to just win it, just outscore them basically.
Now we go to Honolulu in Aloha Stadium, and we look at the Christmas Classic, as you want to call it, the Sheridan Hawaii Bowl. And you got the Rice Owls 7-5 taking on the Fresno State Bulldogs at 6-7, and already losing record for the Bulldogs this year. Kind of a questionable pick to me for them to put them in a bowl game, but I guess since they're so close to Hawaii, it kind of made sense. But the Owls rolling pretty good, doing a lot this year. Do you think Fresno even stands a chance to even come close to winning this ball game?
I think it's going to be very competitive. And to your point on the Fresno thing, from what I've understood, the way the NCAA looks at it is by playing the extra game, being the 13 regular season games, which hardly anybody does, they actually didn't penalize them for it. They wiped out that one loss, which makes them 6-6. So therefore, that qualified them. So, by technicality, they are in a bowl. And plus, Fresno is a perennial bowl team. They've been in bowls countless times back when they had Coach Hill, and now they've got, I can't even think of it, Coach Reuter, I think's his name now. And he's done a really good job out there. But, Rice kind of got off to a slow start, but they played a really nasty early schedule, which maybe helped them some. Most people give them up for dead about the 4th, 5th game, but, they got in the conference schedule and were able to play against some teams that, more evenly matched, I guess you could say, and start playing some pretty good ball, and therefore, made it to a bowl, a solid year for them. And as you say, I think it's going to be a really close game, but I like our Owls actually to win this thing.
And Brock, looking at Fresno here, they had Derek Carr last year, a pretty good team. Might have went 8-9 wins last year with Carr at their side, and no Carr this year. He's in the NFL playing for the Raiders now. It kind of slowed down their passing attack a little bit. Can Rice just control the ball, do what they do, and keep Fresno from throwing the deep ball early?
I think they can, in a way, and to some degree. Fresno State, even though they're 6-7 on the year, it's debatable whether they should have got in, like you said, debatable whether they should have got into a bowl game or not. But, going back, I think they can stop Rice. Rice is a good football team. I was just looking at their schedule. They lost their first 3 games to Notre Dame, Texas A&M, and Old Dominion. And then they ripped off, I believe, 4 or 5 straight there. So, Rice is a good team. They've always been a good team. They play tough, but so does Fresno State. They come up 14 points shy of beating Boise and winning their conference, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, whenever it was. So, my pick on this game is I like Rice. I don't know. I don't think Fresno State can have enough willpower and firepower to slow down Rice and their running game and even their passing attack. I think Rice defense is a tad better than what Fresno State is going to be used to, when they're trying to game plan for this offensively. So overall, I like Rice to win this ball game and end their season with an 8-5 record.
Well, we got a double pick for the Owls there to close out the picks for this week. We'll be back next week with the more, interesting games, the more high-profile games. A lot of people overlook these and don't want to watch them. But like I said before, we get into these games. These are the heart and soul, what kicks off bowl week and what's get everybody excited. And now we're going to troll down here and look at the coaching carousel for the offseason, I guess if you want to call it. Brady Hoke's out at Michigan. Wisconsin's coach goes to Oregon State. Michael Waynes is going to Florida from Colorado State. Paul Christ is looking to go to Wisconsin from Pitt. You got a lot of people moving around, Artie, and, who do you think Michigan might be looking at to fill that vacancy that Brady Hoke just couldn't seem to get things done up there?
Well, I mean, as far as just, I guess you could say Michigan man making their pick, you got former coach Low Carr. He was actually looking to bring back an old quarterback of his, and actually a current NFL coach being Jim Harbaugh. I mean, he started, I do believe, for Michigan back in the 80s, early 90s, somewhere in there, and had a decent career. And, of course, obviously had a decent, or I would say a good career in the NFL for a little bit there with the Colts. But anyway, Harbaugh would be a nice fit, I think, for them, because he could get them back to that downhill, nasty bowl style football that they're used to. And the whole spread thing, it's good for some schools. I don't necessarily think it's good for Michigan, though. Rodriguez tried to run it. Hope did to an extent, and it's just not worked. They're not able to get the kind of athletes they need in there to do that kind of offense. And with Harbaugh coming in, he could get back to that smash mouth, good defense, run the ball, and boring football, I guess you could say, that they're used to.
Well, Michigan being an old school team like, say, Alabama or even USC, pro style, run it down your throat, throw it when you have to, kind of offense, Harbaugh would be the better fit. And Colorado State, they're going to be without Michael Wayne after this year. He's heading to the Swamp to try to revive the Gators, who weren't bad under Muschamp. I just don't think he got the right fit as far as athletes go.
Well, he was extremely unlucky if you look at it. I believe he had somewhere along the lines of 15 kids or more on the IR last year. I mean, that's unheard of. I mean, how do you win games when you got more kids on your medical list than you do on your roster? It's difficult.
And Brock, looking at Muschamp, he has decided to go back to the old stomping grounds. He's going back to the Plains to coach the defense for Auburn. Do you think this new style of SEC play that we've seen this year of big points, big numbers, big offense, can he bring back the old school, middle 90s SEC shut you down defense?
I think he can. I think when he went to Florida, he couldn't control it all because, in my own opinion and what I've seen from him when he was at Florida, he was more of a coordinator than a head coach. When he was at Florida, he had some good years, he had some bad years. Obviously, this year was not the year he was hoping to have, like any coach. And so, he resigns after the Florida State game, not going to coach in Florida's bowl game this year, but going back, to his old roots, defense coordinator, going back to Auburn, where he started out as a grad assistant, I believe, if I'm not wrong. I think give him a couple years, maybe not next season, but maybe the season after that. I believe he can get Auburn back to where they need to be defensive-wise. Him recruiting, he'll be able to, not worry about everybody in the system on, I need to go out and get me a quarterback. I need to go try to get me a 5-star receiver. He can just focus on, hey, I need a safety. I need a linebacker. I need a defensive end. He ain't got to worry about all these other athletes around him to recruit. But overall, I do believe give him time, he'll get Auburn back to that defense of hard-nosed, we're not afraid of you. We will hit you in the mouth. We can stop you, and we will stop you. But overall, just give him time, and I think he'll build it back up to where they need to be.
Well, I think Will can get them back to just a structure of some sort. I think that's been Auburn's biggest problem over the past 2 years. They just don't look like they know what's going on half the time, which is not a good sign if you're an athletic director watching your team. I mean, it's just it's got to be extremely frustrating to see your offense play so well and your defense not so much. But Will bring back that, as you say, smash mouth. He wants you to hit somebody, or he's gonna hit you. Basically, that's his mentality, and he. I think as far as his head coaching went, he took a mentality kind of like a Spurrier, which in Spurrier's case, he looked at it as, I'm going to run the offense, I'm going to get somebody else to run the defense. And I think he took that same mentality of, I'm going to run the defense, but I'm going to try to find somebody to run the offense. And I think that works sometimes, but in Muschamp's case, it just didn't happen. They brought in several coordinators, but just nothing ever really stuck.
Well, it's hard for a defensive coach to say, hey, like you said, I'm going to get someone else to try to run the offense, but I'm going to also be looking over his shoulder as to what he's calling. And if I don't like it, well, then I'm going to tell him to change it.
Mm-hmm.
But just looking at him, like I said, he has to look over everything as a head coach. And I don't think that's his, mentality to do. I think he's a defense coordinator. I think that's his right persona, his right job. And I just don't think he's really a head coach material person.
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, I think I'd have to agree with you. But one thing you need to keep in mind is, some of these coaches, Belichick comes to mind. He started out with the Browns, and it was just a disaster for him for a few years there, and just everybody just kind of give up on him. And once he got fired, he was a bust and whatever. And then, as you see later on, got the Patriots job, and basically the rest is history. And Will could be that same type of guy. This might just be a bad blotch on his record, but given another opportunity somewhere else, he could prove everybody wrong.
Well, I believe you have a point there. Give or take a few more years, he might wind up with another head coaching job somewhere. Houston was looking at him to bring him in as a head coach. Who knows?
That's true.
He could have bounced to Houston instead of Auburn,
Mm-hmm.
been head coach at Houston, and somehow made that program over there work, and find the right guys to run that system that he wanted to run.
That's very true.
Well, some coaches, they just better behind the scenes, and some, like say, maybe it was too high profile too quick. Maybe that was the problem. He just jumped in both feet, and they were expecting a Spurrier type example, and they just couldn't get it that quick because he's not an offensive minded coach. But looking at Colorado State, they're kind of eyeballing Oregon's OC right now, Mr. Frost. And Brock, how would a team like Colorado State go from smash mouth running the ball to wide open, throw it, run it to the corners, pitch option, speed option, just whatever? How hard a transition would that be for a team like that?
Well, I think it depends on your athletes and who you have in that system, already. And just the way they run their offense, they like to run the ball, and they like to mix in some play action pass, try to hit you deep off of those, especially if they've got one-on-one coverage with maybe one safety, or if the safeties are even creeping down to look, to bring some heat. But it just depends, in my own view, of what athletes you've got out there and what type of system they can handle and they can run at the college level.
I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. I mean, I had the same thought. As you say, speed is definitely would be something that Frost would need to be able to run his style of offense. But also keep in mind, he may not necessarily run the spread if he was to become a head coach. He could go back to his roots as a quarterback and run more of a power running type game. It's just what Oregon likes to run. It's what Chip Kelly instilled in them, and Helfrich was also the offense coordinator under Kelly, and that's what he liked to do. So, Frost might have kind of been grandfathered in. We just don't know until if he gets the job.
But will he install the offense that he sort of had at Oregon?
Like I say, it just depends upon his preference. You just don't know until he actually accepts it. Scott Frost being a former Nebraska quarterback, they run a little option, and that power just stretch you out type running game. So it could go back to that possibly.
Well, speaking of Nebraska, we are still scratching our heads here. Their head coach makes a lateral move, I guess, and goes to Oregon State, and now Nebraska is in the hunt for a coach. And Artie, what do you make of this move that he made for some reason to go to Corvallis?
Well, actually, Riley went to Omaha, other way around. But yeah, I mean, bizarre is the first word that comes to mind. I mean, you go from, this was Riley's second stint at Oregon State. Really loved the school and had been there for years. I don't know, something like maybe 11 years thereabouts this time around. And that's not counting the other time around. I think maybe close to 15 years total. So, I mean, it's just, if I'm the Corvallis fans up there, I'm just kind of in shock because he just up and left you. But, I know Nebraska is a high-profile, or was at one time, a high-profile job. At this point, I don't know if it's high-profile anymore. But, Riley's a good coach, don't get me wrong. But can he take Nebraska back to the heights that they were once at? I just don't see it happening. I see him basically making basically what Pelini was doing with them. I mean, this is probably an 8-9 win team every single season. Might squeeze in a 10-win season every once in a while. But as far as can Riley bring home a Big Ten title, I don't think so.
Well, and in an even more lateral move, Brock, you have Wisconsin's coach, and he goes to Corvallis. Excuse me, I made a mistake earlier, but now he's going to go from Wisconsin with a really good running game, a really good blocking scheme, zone read, very NFL-like. He takes a lot of running backs and linemen and puts them in the NFL level. And now he's going to go to Corvallis and coach this Beaver team. And I just don't understand. Maybe you can make some heads or tails of this coaching change.
Well, he originally was going to go to Wisconsin. And then he changed his mind and says, no, wait, I'm going to switch it up and go to Oregon State. So he's flip-flopping back here and forth and let us know where, to land. But I think, he made the right decision to where he wanted to go, where he wanted to move his family to and everything. And Artie, do you think he made the right move?
I don't know. I mean, as you say, if he just had it in his heart that he wanted to go to Oregon State, then, more power to him. But as far as just a football move, Wisconsin, this is just a perennial Big Ten team. They're there every year. They're going to compete for the title every single season. They've been to the past, I believe, went to this last one and maybe the 2 years before championship game. I mean, they're used to playing for the Big Ten title every single season. And turning out running backs like there's no tomorrow. I mean, I can name you 5 or 6 right offhand. And, it's just it's not the safest move in the world. But as you say, if he had his own personal reasons, then more power to him. But I don't know. It's not that Oregon State's a bad team, don't get me wrong. They're basically the same way, a perennial bowl team. But they're not going to win no Pac-12 title anytime soon. So, I mean, just from a championship, conference winning type team and national championship hunt, Wisconsin would have been the better place to stay.
Well, the coaching carousel gets crazier every single year, and then even the past few years, it's even trickled down to the high school level to where coaches are swapping and flipping and flopping. So, we'll keep an eye on this for you as well as the rest of these bowl games. But as for me and for Artie and for Brock, this is Nikita Magnum for PSN Sports, and we are signing off to join you again next week.